Hey, welcome back. This is part 6, and it's the last part of the if-else-if lesson, and also the last part of conditionals. You want to figure that this is not everything to be said about conditionals, but it is a pretty good description of the syntax available for conditionals that's going to matter to you as a student in Module 0. So up to this point, the coding challenges have been, they're getting a little bit more complicated in what we're doing. It started out with just like, hey, return the opposite of this Boolean. Now it's like, hey, you've got an object, you've got a couple of other values, build a bunch of strings based on conditions. But the instructions have remained, almost to a fault, really descriptive. So it's like, you're going to do this. Your function should use this to do that. Now, as we move further on towards Module 1 and the end of Module 0, the instructions are going to become a little bit more, here's what the function does, here's an example, okay, go have fun, like go make it do that. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into one that's worded a little differently. This one is going to be convert score to a grade. Write a function called convert score to grade. Given a score, convert score to grade returns a string representing the letter grade corresponding to the given score. So notes 190 is an A, 89 to 80 is a B, 79 to 70 is a C, is a D, and an F. So if the score is greater than 100 or less than 0, it should return an invalid score. So here's one test case. And you could see how one could theoretically write a bunch of extra test cases if one wanted to. And what we're probably going to do is just adjust this value and then hope what we want to come out will come out. So let's grab our very sparsely worded function stub. Let's grab our singular test case, or I should say solitary. And so your code here, gotcha. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to copy these notes and I'm going to put them in the place where I'm working on the function, just so I don't have to keep cycling back and forth between the two. So if I do this and this, it'll let me do a multi-line comment, which is an easy way to input something that probably wouldn't format as a comment in general. So now that I have that, what I would suggest is that the first thing I would want to do is I'm going to say this one right here. If given a score that is greater than 100 or less than 0, it should return invalid score. So I'm going to say if score is greater than 100 or score is less than 0, return invalid score. Now here's where the like what should I do comes up, and for a lot of this it's like, well, do whatever you want really. And the idea there is that we could just keep writing if statements. Do if for the next part, then an if for the part after that. And that's a perfectly acceptable way of doing it. Now what I would say that I'm going to do is I'm going to write if else if statements, just because. So one of the things that you want to think about is a way to approach this such that we don't have to do the same calculations over and over again. So what I'm going to say is that what we've done so far is described what happens if the score is greater than 100 or less than 100. Now, it might not be obvious, but the way that you could go about this would be to go from the bottom up, which is to say the first thing I'm going to do is see if the score is less than 60. So if score is less than 60, if the score is less than 60, I know that it's somewhere between 59 and 0. And 59 and 0 describes exactly what an F should be. So in that case, I'm going to write return F. Now the else if portion is also going to work here, and since I've sorted out everything below 60, and everything above 100, and everything below 0, I could now say if the score is less than 70. If the score is less than 70, I know that if I've made it into this section right here, the score has to be a D, because it's not greater than 100, it's not less than 0, and it's also not less than 60, which leaves the only thing that could happen in this line 19, if the score is less than 70, means that it has to be a D. So we'll return D. Score is less than 80. We know the score has to be 79 to 70, which is a C. Continuing on, and if the score is less than 90, the rest of the conditionals have organized it such that the score has to be 89 to 80, and so B. We're also assuming that the score is a number. So if the score came in and was like, the string fantastic work, then we just have an error. This function's not going to worry about that. We're going to assume that every score coming in is a valid, at least a number of some kind. So else if, okay, so here's where we need to think a little bit about how we could avoid another conditional, or we can think a little bit more, because we could absolutely say else if score is, what would it be, less than or equal to 100, and score is greater than or equal to 90. So we could write that and then return A, and we would get the correct answer. But what I would say is that if we get to this point here, the only possible remaining score that it could be, given that it's a number, and given that the rest of our statements are written correctly, is an A. We know it's not out of bounds. We know it's greater than 60. We know it's greater than 70, greater than 80, and greater than 90. Sorry, greater than or equal to all of those numbers. So at this point, we know that the score has to be between 90 and 100, and if we look up here, that results in an A. So let's return A. And let's start running some test cases. So for the first one with a score of 91, we should get A. For the second one with a score of 81, we should get B. Third one with a score of 71, we should get C. For the fourth one with a score of 61, we should get D. If we have a 51, we failed. Very sad. And if we have a 511, that's an invalid score. If we have a negative 511, teacher might want to talk to us after class because we again have an invalid score. So that's a way where thinking about the way you organize your conditionals before you start writing them can save you a little bit of writing in certain cases. It's definitely not always the case, but it does happen from time to time. With that in mind, let's bring our function now completed back and put it in the input window, run our tests, and we're in good shape. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.